Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to take a second, just a second, and look at the date. It is early 2026. And I want to ask you a question that might feel a little uncomfortable. How do you feel when you unlock your phone in the morning? Do you feel informed? Do you feel grounded? Or do you feel a little bit like you're standing on a rug that is constantly being pulled out from under you?
That is the defining sensation of the mid-2020s, isn't it? It's vertigo.
Vertigo is the perfect word for it.
Yeah.
It feels like we are living in a moment where the very concept of truth has become slippery. We're watching institutions that, we used to trust implicitly, science, media, government, sort of crumbling in real time. We are seeing video evidence that looks 100% authentic, but in the back of our minds, we know an AI could have generated it in a server farm in, 3 seconds?
And that uncertainty breeds a very specific kind of anxiety. It's not just that we don't know what's happening, it's that we don't know how to know what's happening.
Exactly. And that is why today's deep dive is, I think, one of the most practical and urgent ones we've ever done. We aren't just summarizing a book today. We are trying to build a survival kit. We are digging into a massive, sprawling conversation between Dave Rubin and a man who has effectively made a career out of being the designated adult in the room, Michael Shermer.
A legendary figure in the world of skepticism, a real titan.
He is. For those who don't know, he's the founder of Skeptic Magazine. He's written, 14 books? And he has a new one out called Truth, What It Is, How to Find It, and Why It Still Matters. Which, honestly, sounds a bit like a textbook title, but the content is absolute dynamite.
It is, and I think before we even get into the arguments, we really need to talk about Shermer's background a bit. Because there is a detail there that I think explains his entire worldview, and it has absolutely nothing to do with academia.
You're talking about the bikes.
I am talking about the bikes. Before he was Michael Shermer, the intellectual, he was a professional cyclist. And not just a ride-around-the-park cyclist. He competed in the race across America.
That's the one that goes nonstop from coast to coast, right?
Yeah.
It's basically sleep deprivation and hallucination on 2 wheels.
Precisely. It is an exercise in pure suffering. And I think that's so relevant because digging for truth, real, objective truth, is an endurance sport. It hurts. It is exhausting. It requires you to push through the bonk, that moment where your brain just wants to give up and accept the easy narrative.
Right.
Shermer describes himself primarily as a researcher and an editor, and I see that as an extension of that athletic discipline. He is constantly refining his own manuscript of reality, even when it's painful to delete a chapter he loved.
So here is our mission for the next hour. We are going to borrow Shermer's toolkit. We're going to try to equip you with some heavy-duty mental models. We're going to talk about Bayesian reasoning, which I know it sounds like scary math, but I promise it's a superpower.
It really is.
We're going to look at why we are hardwired to believe lies via the default to truth theory. We're going to unpack something called base rate neglect.
And we are going to go down some very strange rabbit holes. We'll discuss why smart people join cults, what the Chinese spy balloon tells us about aliens, and a truly disturbing story about AI making Steven Pinker dance.
I still can't get that image out of my head. It's just... But let's start with the crisis, the hook. Shermer's assessment of the state of truth in 2026 is pretty blunt. He says it is not great.
Not great is the polite academic way of saying a complete and utter catastrophe. Shermer argues that we are in the middle of a total collapse of trust in major institutions. We're talking about professional scientists, public policymakers, politicians, the whole lot.
Yeah.
And he pinpoints the accelerant, the match that lit this specific dumpster fire, as the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
This is something we are still untangling years later. It feels like the moment the contract was broken.
It was, and Shermer frames this using a concept called the certainty trap. And this is crucial for understanding why we are where we are. The failure wasn't necessarily that the science changed. I mean, science always changes.
Right, that's his job.
The failure was a communication failure. It was a failure of arrogance.
Walk me through this certainty trap. What does that mean exactly?
Okay, think back to early 2020. You have policymakers and health officials going on television. They are terrified. The public is terrified. And the instinct of a leader in that moment is to project strength, to project confidence.
Of course.
So when they gave advice, whether it was don't buy masks or later you must wear masks or schools must close, they presented these commands with 100% certainty.
Right. It was binary. This is the truth with a capital T. There was no room for doubt.
Exactly. They presented probabilistic guesses as absolute, unshakable facts, 0% or 100%. The vaccine stops transmission 100%, schools are 100% unsafe.
And then Reality happened. The virus mutated, we got more data, and the guidance. It flipped.
And because they had started at 100% certainty, the reversal didn't look like an update. It looked like a lie. It looked like a betrayal. If I tell you I am absolutely certain the bridge is safe and then the bridge collapses, you aren't going to trust me when I say, okay, but listen, the next bridge is definitely safe.
So this brings us to the first tool in the toolkit, the solution to this certainty trap. Shermer calls it Bayesian reasoning.
Yes, named for the Reverend Thomas Bayes.
Now, stop right there. I hear Bayesian, and I get a flashback to a statistics class I barely passed in college. My eyes just glaze over. I think for a lot of people, this sounds like dense academic jargon. So, strip away the math. What does it actually mean to be Bayesian in real life?
It's actually very, very intuitive. At its core, Bayesian reasoning is about trading in your on-off switch for a dimmer dial.
Okay, I like that. A dimmer dial, not a switch.
In a traditional worldview, you want to know, is this true or false? Is coffee good for me? Yes or no? Is this policy right? Yes or no? A Bayesian approaches the world by assigning a credence, a probability to a claim.
So instead of saying, it is a fact that schools should close, I say.
You say, based on the data I have right now from Italy and China, I assign a, say, 60% probability to the claim that closing schools will save lives.
60%. That feels honest, but it also feels unsure.
It is honest, and here's the magic of it. That initial 60% is your prior. It's your starting point. Now, let's say a month goes by. A new study comes out from Sweden showing that they kept schools open and the transmission rate among kids was negligible.
Okay, so I have new evidence, a new data point.
If you were operating on that true-false switch, you're stuck. You said it was true that schools must close. This new evidence threatens your entire reality, so you have to attack the study, call it fake news, or just ignore it to protect your ego.
But if I'm Bayesian,
You just turn the dial. You update your priors. You say, oh, interesting, that Swedish data is compelling. My confidence in closing schools has dropped from 60% to 40%. Actually, now that I look at the mental health data, it's down to 20%. Okay, let's open the schools.
you change your mind, but you don't lose your credibility. In fact, you might gain some.
Exactly, because you never claimed to be infallible. You claim to be following the probability curve. It allows for nuance. It allows for growth.
But, and this is but Shermer points out the political reality here, and I think this is why we don't see this happening. Imagine the President of the United States walking up to the podium during a crisis. The world is on fire, and he looks into the camera and says, "My fellow Americans, I am currently 58% sure that my plan is going to work."
He would be destroyed, absolutely destroyed.
Right. The opposition would run ads saying weak leadership. The pundits would scream uncertainty. He doesn't know what he's doing.
That is the optics problem. Politicians feel a compulsion to project absolute confidence because they believe that's what voters want. They think leadership equals certainty. But Shermer argues that this is a fatal error in the long run.
Because reality is Bayesian even if politics isn't.
Precisely. Reality is probabilistic. When you pretend it isn't, you are setting yourself up for that inevitable moment where you run into a wall. And that crash destroys trust far more than admitting uncertainty would have.
We saw this play out with the Great Barrington Declaration, didn't we?
Yeah.
Shermer brings up J. Bhattacharya.
Yes. That was a classic example of Bayesian thinking being crushed by binary politics. By the fall of 2020, Bhattacharya and others were looking at the data, the base rates of risk. We'll get more into that later. But they saw that for kids, the risk was statistically tiny. For the elderly, it was huge. So they proposed focus protection.
Which seems like a logical, nuanced update to the policy.
It was a Bayesian update. New data suggests we don't need a total lockdown. Let's adjust the dial. But because the narrative had been set at 100%, lockdowns are the only way, their update was treated as heresy. They were demonized.
Shermer also gives a really visceral example of policy overreach that just defied all common sense. The Santa Barbara beaches.
Oh, this one really gets to him. He lives there. Picture this. It's the height of the pandemic. We know that UV light kills the virus. We know fresh air disperses it. The beach is literally the safest place you could possibly be.
And the government closed them.
They put up police tape. They had cops patrolling the sand. They forced people off the sunny, windy beach and back into their poorly ventilated apartments.
It's madness. It's the definition of anti-science.
It's binary thinking gone wrong. If outside interaction is bad, then all outside interaction is bad. There was no nuance, no dimmer dial. And Shermer's point is that when rules defy basic common sense, people don't just break the rules, they stop respecting the rule makers entirely.
And then you add the partisan layer on top of it. He talks about Trump derangement syndrome interfering with the Bayesian process.
He does, and he's careful to note this happens on both sides, this tribal thinking. But the school example is just so stark. He points out that in the summer of 2020, there were plenty of Democrats and teachers' unions discussing how to open schools safely. It was a real debate.
And then Trump tweeted,
"Open the schools." And instantly the polarity reversed. It became a tribal signal. If Team Red says open, Team Blue must say close. The data didn't change. The science didn't change. The tribe changed. And that is the death of Bayesian reasoning. You aren't updating your priors based on evidence. You're updating based on what the bad orange man said.
So if the institutions are trapped in this binary, certainty-obsessed loop, and we can't trust them, where do we go? Shermer says the Walter Cronkite era is dead.
Rest in peace, Walter. We can no longer sit down at 6 p.m. and have a nice man in a suit tell us that's the way it is. That world is gone. We have moved from a high-trust society to a verification society.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. Shermer says even he, a guy who has watched 60 Minutes for 40 years, can't just watch it anymore. He watches a segment and then he pulls out his phone to see what they left out. He has to fact-check the fact-checkers.
And this brings us to the rise of independent media. If we aren't getting the truth from the top down, we are trying to scrape it together from the bottom up. We've got citizen journalism.
The democratization of the news. Anyone with a smartphone is a reporter. Dave Rubin is a prime example. He left the legacy system, set up a desk in his garage, and built an entire empire.
But there is a specific story Shermer tells that I think perfectly captures the double-edged sword of this new world. The story of Nick Shirley.
Right. Nick Shirley. He's a 23-year-old YouTuber, just a kid with a camera, and yet he broke a massive national story about fraud involving Somali nonprofits in Minnesota. Millions of dollars stolen.
He just went there and filmed it.
He just went there. And Shermer's reaction to this is so interesting. On one hand, he's applauding it. Bravo, Nick.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he asks a really important question. Why did it take a 23-year-old YouTuber?
Right. Where was the Minneapolis Star-Tribune?
Yeah.
Where was the FBI?
Yeah.
Where was CNN?
Exactly. When a kid with an iPhone is doing the job of the Fourth Estate, it signals a profound failure of our legacy institutions. They were either too lazy to look or too scared of the political optics to touch the story.
But, and here is the deep dive nuance we need to hit, Shermer also waves a yellow flag here. He says, can we really trust Nick Shirley?
That's the rub. We celebrate the scoop, but we have to remember, Nick Shirley doesn't have an editorial board. He doesn't have a standards and practices department. We don't know what he didn't film.
We don't know the context he left on the cutting room floor.
We don't know if he has an axe to grind or a specific agenda. So while citizen journalism is a vital check on power, it introduces a massive amount of noise. It's chaotic.
And that chaos. Well, for some bad actors, chaos is the goal.
Yeah.
This leads us to the strategy known as flooding the zone.
This is the Steve Bannon playbook. He famously said, the Democrats don't matter, the real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with short.
It's such a cynical, brutal strategy.
It's information warfare. The goal isn't necessarily to convince you of a specific lie. They don't need you to believe that 2 + 2 = 5. They just need to scream so many different numbers at you. 2 + 2 is 4, it's 7, it's a banana, it's a conspiracy, that you eventually just cover your ears and give up.
It's exhaustion as a weapon.
It is. You create a state of epistemic nihilism. People say, I can't figure it out, it's all too much, so I'm just going to check out.
And honestly, I feel that. Who has the time? I try to stay informed, but if I have to fact-check 20 different stories a day, cross-reference YouTube videos with government reports, that's a full-time job.
It is. And this is where Shermer pivots to a surprisingly optimistic take on technology. He thinks AI, large language models like Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini might be our salvation here.
Which is ironic, considering AI is also generating the deepfakes. But how does he see it helping?
He views AI as the ultimate research assistant. He gave an example of checking COVID death statistics. He didn't want to read 50 articles, so he asked an LLM to scrape the web, read the top 27 credible sources, and synthesize the data into a consensus report.
So the AI cuts through the flood and finds the signal.
Exactly. And he predicts This is going to get personal. We aren't just going to search Google anymore. We are going to have personal digital assistants, AI agents, that live in our devices, maybe even in our glasses or an earpiece.
A truth filter that's always on.
Imagine watching a political debate. A candidate makes a claim. Your AI whispers in your ear or pops up text on your lenses saying, "That is false." Context. He voted against that bill in 2024.
That would change everything. But it also gets a little creepy. Shermer and Rubin had a funny moment about their cars, right?
The Tesla story, yes. This cracked me up because I think everyone with a smart device has felt this. Rubin was in his car having a conversation, and he asked the AI, "Are you listening to us right now?"
And the AI gets all defensive.
The AI says, "I respect your privacy. I only listen when you activate me."
I won't listen if you don't want me to.
Right. And then, a minute later, Rubin asks, "Wait, are you listening?" And the AI immediately responds, "Yes, I'm here." It admitted it was listening the whole time.
Shermer had a similar one. He's driving around Santa Barbara with an old friend. They're having a deep, intimate heart-to-heart, talking about relationships, history, politics, private stuff.
Yeah.
And suddenly, in a lull in the conversation, the car chimes in. Is there anything else you need?
It's the panopticon problem. To get the benefit of the truth filter, we have to invite the surveillance state into our front seat. We are trading privacy for clarity. And in a world where the zone is flooded with garbage, Shermer seems to think that's a trade we might have to make.
So we have the external tools, Bayesian reasoning, AI assistance.
Yeah.
But we also need to patch our own software, because Shermer spends a big chunk of this book looking inward. Why are we so easily fooled?
The psychology of belief. He starts with a concept called default to truth.
Which sounds like a good thing.
It is a good thing, mostly. The theory is that human beings are evolutionarily hardwired to believe what other human beings tell them.
Because if we didn't, we'd never get anything done. Society would just grind to a halt.
Exactly. Imagine your morning, you ask your spouse, "Is the coffee ready?" They say yes. You believe them. You walk outside, a sign says, "Train station this way." You believe it. If you had to fact check every single interaction, is he lying about the coffee? Is this sign a trap laid by my enemies? You would be paralyzed. Society relies on trust to function.
But that necessary trust is a vulnerability.
It is the back door. Con artists, liars, and cult leaders know that your default setting is true. They hack that system. Because you want to believe, you miss the red flags until it's too late.
And this leads directly into what I think is the most important concept in this entire deep dive. If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this: base rate neglect.
Base rate neglect. It sounds dry, but it explains almost everything about why the modern world feels so scary.
So break it down for us. What is a base rate and why am I neglecting it?
Okay. A base rate is simply the statistical background frequency of an event. It's the denominator. It's how often something happens in the general population.
And the neglect.
The neglect happens when we ignore that boring background number and focus 100% of our attention on a vivid, emotional, specific story right in front of us.
Shermer uses the Tinder swindler as the perfect example.
He does. And we need to really look at this because it changes how you view victims. So, Simon Leviev, the Tinder swindler. He's handsome, he's rich, he flies women on private jets, and then he says, "I'm in trouble, my enemies are after me, I need $50,000.
And the women send it. And the internet mocked them relentlessly. How could you be so dumb? I would never fall for that.
But Shermer defends them, he says. You are suffering from base rate neglect. You are looking at the numerator, the 4 women who fell for the scam. You are ignoring the denominator, the base rate.
Which is all the women he tried this on who said no.
Exactly. We don't see the 100 women he swiped on who ignored him. We don't see the 50 women who went on one date, got a weird con man vibe, and blocked his number. We don't see the women who dated him, but refused to send money.
So the base rate of human behavior is actually pretty skeptical. Most people don't fall for it.
Yes, most people did not fall for the Tinder swindler. But because we only see the failures, because Netflix doesn't make a documentary about the woman who swiped left, we conclude that humans are gullible idiots.
This applies to cults too, right? We see the people in NXIVM or Scientology and think, people are sheep.
But we ignore the millions and millions of people who have never joined a cult. Statistically, humans are extremely resistant to cults. We just focus on the outliers.
This connects directly to the black-pilled phenomenon.
It explains it perfectly. Being black-pilled is when you believe society is collapsing, everyone is evil, and there is no hope. That is simply base rate neglect, weaponized by an algorithm.
Because your feed is showing you the school shooting.
Yeah.
It's showing you the bridge collapse. It's showing you the riot.
It is showing you the numerator. It is not showing you the denominator. The 100,000 schools that were safe today. The millions of bridges that didn't fall. The thousands of protests that were peaceful. If you build your worldview only on the news, which is by definition the rare bad stuff, you are building a map of a world that doesn't exist. You are living in a horror movie when the reality is actually much more boring and much safer.
So the tool here is always ask for the denominator.
Always. When you see a scary video, when you read a terrifying headline, ask, out of how many? That question alone will lower your blood pressure.
Speaking of scary videos and distorted reality, let's talk about history. Because Shermer points out a disturbing trend that is gaining traction online: the rewriting of World War II.
This is the dark side of question everything. We are seeing a movement, led by certain influencers and citizen historians, that is trying to rehabilitate Adolf Hitler and paint Winston Churchill as the villain.
Yeah, it sounds insane to even say those words. Hitler was the good guy, but getting millions of views.
It is. And this brings us to a logical fallacy that Shermer warns about, the genetic fallacy.
This is about judging information based on where it comes from.
Right. Shermer brings up an example of a video analysis of tire tracks. I believe it was related to some forensic incident. A guy named Tim P. did a physics analysis of the tire tracks.
And people attacked Shermer for sharing it, not because the physics were wrong, but because Tim P. might be a Russian asset or a bad guy.
That is the genetic fallacy. This info comes from a bad source, therefore the info is false.
Yeah.
Shermer's point is, I don't care if Tim P. is a Russian spy or a saint. Look at the tire tracks. Do they curve left or right? Physics doesn't care about the messenger.
However, and this is a big nuance, Shermer draws a hard line when it comes to the Holocaust denial stuff. He critiques a strategy known as just asking questions, or, as he puts it, J-keying off.
It's a crude term, but it describes a very specific manipulative tactic. You see this with figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Daryl Cooper. They sit there and say, I'm just curious. I'm just asking questions. Why did Churchill refuse peace talks? How could those ovens burn that many bodies?
But they aren't actually looking for answers, are they?
No. Genuine curiosity seeks answers. If you are genuinely curious about the cremation capacity of the ovens at Auschwitz, you can read the engineering reports. You can read the historians' accounts. You can read Shermer's own books where he debunked this 20 years ago.
The answers exist. They are readily available.
The answers are there. But these influencers aren't reading the answers. They are asking the question to plant a seed of doubt. They are leading the witness. I'm just asking implies that the official story is a lie, and I'm a brave truth teller for questioning it.
It's skepticism used as a weapon against truth, rather than a tool to find it.
Exactly. And Shermer admits he doesn't know if they're doing it because they are genuine anti-Semites, or if they are doing it because outrage gets clicks and clicks get money. But the result is the same. A generation of young people who think, hey, maybe Hitler wasn't so bad. And that is dangerous.
It is terrifying. Now let's pivot to a different kind of truth. Because one of the most surprising parts of this conversation was watching Shermer, the guy who spent the 2000s debating pastors, soften his stance on religion.
It is a significant evolution. If you remember the new atheism days, Shermer, Dawkins, Hitchens, their stance was, religion is a delusion. It's factually wrong. It's a virus of the mind.
But now he's making a distinction between empirical truth and pragmatic truth.
This is the peace treaty between science and faith. Empirical truth is factual. Did Jonah literally live inside a whale for 3 days?
Biologically, no. Gastric acids alone would be a problem, among other things.
Right. If you read the Bible as a biology textbook, it fails. That is empirical truth. But pragmatic truth asks a different question. What is the story for? What is its utility?
The story of Jonah is about running from your responsibility. It's about hitting rock bottom, the belly of the beast, and finding redemption.
That is a psychological truth. It is a moral truth. Shermer argues that asking if the fish was real is missing the point entirely. The story is true because it works. It helps people navigate their lives.
There is a fantastic story he tells about Richard Dawkins and Ken Miller that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, the true cross story. This is great. So you have Dawkins, the arch-atheist, and Ken Miller, who is a brilliant Ivy League biologist, but also a devout Catholic. They are debating.
And Dawkins thinks he has the ultimate checkmate.
He says, Ken, imagine we find a piece of the true cross, and on it there is a piece of dried flesh from Jesus. Would you, Ken Miller, take that flesh to a lab, extract the DNA, and test it to see if he really had no biological father, to prove the virgin birth?
It's the ultimate gotcha. If he says yes, he's testing God. If he says no, he's anti-science.
And Miller doesn't blink. He looks at Dawkins and says, Richard, I'm not claiming this is true in a scientific sense. I'm not saying it's a DNA claim. This is what we believe.
Wow. He stepped out of the empirical ring and into the pragmatic ring.
And it stopped Dawkins in his tracks because they were speaking different languages. Shermer has realized that religion provides community, ritual, and a moral framework, pragmatic truth, that science simply cannot replace.
And this leads to the concept of cultural Christianity. Even Dawkins is saying it now.
It's the Chesterton's fence argument. We tore down the fence of religion because we thought it was irrational. But now we are looking at what's coming through the gap. Western democracy, human rights, the value of the individual. These things grew out of Judeo-Christian soil.
And the fear is, if you pull up the roots, the tree dies.
Shermer worries that if Christianity collapses, we won't get a Star Trek secular utopia. We will get a vacuum. And that vacuum will be filled by things that are much less tolerant, like radical Islam or extreme political ideologies.
He specifically mentions woke ideology as a kind of secular religion.
He views it as a fundamentalist faith. It has original sin, privilege, it has excommunication, cancel culture, and it has dogmas that cannot be questioned.
We saw that clash in the Senate hearing he mentions. Josh Hawley versus the gynecologist.
That was painful to watch. Senator Hawley asked a simple biological question. Can men get pregnant?
And the doctor and expert couldn't say no.
She wouldn't say it. She danced around it. She used terminology about capacity for pregnancy, and eventually she got angry and accused him of violence for even asking.
And Shermer's take is, we all know the truth. A trans man is a biological female who identifies as a man. Therefore, they have the biological hardware to get pregnant. That is the empirical truth.
The doctor was operating on ideological truth.
She was prioritizing being nice or being an ally over biological reality. And Shermer argues that is the same error the church made with Galileo. When you place your dogma above the observable world, you lose your authority. If a doctor can't tell me the truth about chromosomes, why should I trust her on vaccines? It all comes back to trust. And if we can't trust what we hear, we are rapidly approaching a world where we can't trust what we see. Let's talk about the future of evidence, deepfakes.
We are at the event horizon here. Shermer tells a story about a photo of him and Steven Pinker, another very serious intellectual, sitting on a stage.
And someone put it into Grok AI.
And told it to make them dance.
Wait, you can just type that, make them dance?
Apparently. And suddenly you have a high-definition video of Michael Shermer and Steven Pinker breakdancing. It looks real. The shadows, the movement, the faces, it's perfect.
It's funny when it's dancing intellectuals. It is not funny when it's a world leader.
That is the nightmare. Imagine a video drops tomorrow. It shows Vladimir Putin looking into the camera and ordering a nuclear strike. Or it shows the President of the United States accepting a briefcase full of cash from a drug cartel.
It goes viral instantly. The stock market crashes. Maybe real missiles fly before anyone can debunk it.
Or the flip side, the liar's dividend. A real video comes out of a politician doing something terrible, and they just shrug and say, it's a deep fake.
Don't believe your lying eyes.
Exactly. When everything can be fake, nothing is real. Shermer suggests we might need digital watermarks or blockchain verification, but ultimately he thinks we might have to go back to the old way.
Which is?
Trusted human verifiers. We can't trust the video, so we have to trust the person who says, I was standing there, I saw him do it. We're looping back to needing reputable institutions.
Which is a problem, since we just spent an hour talking about how they're all broken.
It is a paradox. We need them more than ever. Right at the moment, we trust them the least.
Let's end on a topic that combines all of this. Government secrets, high technology, and the desperate desire to believe in something bigger, UFOs.
UAPs, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena.
Why did they rebrand it? Was UFO 2 X-Files?
It was too much baggage. UFO means tinfoil hats and probing. UAP sounds like a technical glitch on a radar screen. It allowed Congress to hold hearings without looking crazy.
But Shermer isn't buying it.
He is the ultimate skeptic here. He breaks it down. He thinks 95% of these sightings are mundane. Balloons, birds, drones, camera artifacts.
And the other 5%, the stuff moving at Mach 10 without a sonic boom, the Tic Tac videos.
He thinks it's us, secret military tech. Think about the SR-71 Blackbird in the 70s. It flew at 90,000 feet at 4,000 miles per hour, Pilots saw it and thought it was alien. It wasn't. It was skunkworks.
So the Tic Tac might just be the 2026 version of the Blackbird.
Exactly. But Shermer has a very specific standard for evidence here. He calls it the Chinese spy balloon standard. And I love this mental model.
Walk us through it.
Remember the balloon in 2023? It was real. And because it was real, the evidence was overwhelming. Civilians saw it. We took HD photos of it. The news tracked it. The Pentagon tracked it. We shot it down. We fished the debris out of the ocean. We put the debris on a truck. We showed the photos of the debris.
It was tangible, verifiable at every step.
It was a complete chain of custody. Shermer's point is, if the government actually had alien spacecraft, the evidence would look like that. Instead, with UFOs, it's classified, or it's in a warehouse I can't tell you about, or my friend saw a document.
The trust me bro standard of evidence.
Right. Shermer argues that the government is actually incompetent at keeping secrets. If they had free energy or anti-gravity tech, someone would have leaked the blueprints. Or Trump would have tweeted a picture of the alien by now.
He absolutely would have, no question.
The fact that they haven't suggests the aliens aren't there. But Shermer goes deeper. He thinks our obsession with aliens is actually religious.
How so?
Look at the narrative. The aliens are always described as advanced, intelligent, and moral. They are coming from the heavens to save us, to stop us from nuking ourselves, give us clean energy.
It's a savior narrative.
It is a technological second coming. We are scared. We feel like we've messed up the planet, so we are looking to the sky for a daddy figure to come down and fix it. Shermer says that's a beautiful story, but it's not science.
He is so confident that he has money on the table.
A $1,000 bet with Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb. Shermer bet that we will have NO definitive disclosure of alien life by December 31st, 2030.
That is coming up fast, 4 years.
And Shermer is betting on silence.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've looked at the erosion of trust and the certainty trap. We've learned to think in probabilities to be Bayesian instead of binaries.
We've learned about base rate neglect, to always ask for the denominator so we don't get blackpilled by the news.
We've explored the dangers of rewriting history, the importance of pragmatic truth in religion, and the terrifying future of AI deepfakes.
And we've looked at the skies and asked if anyone is coming to save us.
And that leads to the final provocation for you, the listener. Shermer's bet is on the table, 2030. Would you take that bet? Do you think they are out there? And if they aren't, if the aliens aren't coming to save us and the government can't save us, what does that mean?
It means we have to save ourselves. It means we have to use these tools, Bayesian reasoning, critical thinking, patience, to rebuild the trust we lost. We have to be the adults in the room.
Well said. Go check out the book, Truth, by Michael Shermer. It's a manual for the modern world. Stay skeptical, stay curious, and we will see you on the next Deep Dive.